It's not. Steve Friend, senior fellow at the Center for Renewing America, former special agent for the FBI, joins us now. Steve, good to have you back with us, sir.
Oh, thanks for having me again, Vic.
These hearings, are they as frustrating for you as they are for me? You hear from the director, he seems to act like, hey, everything's on the up and up. I don't know why you're hassling me.
It's always tremendously frustrating to hear Christopher Wray always, when he stands up there, using the tried and true tactics, saying ongoing investigations, can't reveal sources and methods. But I'm also really frustrated by the members, in both the Democrat and Republicans. They really, with the exception of a few of the senators today, they really did not hold him accountable, and they seem to be happy to fluff him and encourage him and say that they want to renew Section 702 of FISA and continue funding the weaponization of the FBI that we've all become victims of.
Well, there's, for instance, you and I have talked about this before, but why wasn't there any meaningful questions? Maybe I missed it, but I didn't hear any questions today about FBI agents like you being taken off of human trafficking and child exploitation cases and being put on January 6 cases.
No, and you would think that as he kept saying that he's seeing all these elevated threats and risks out there, that question would be asked, because it's a question of manpower. And look, there's a finite amount of resources. You have to be diligent and is how you're going to delegate who's going to handle what. But I think without question, regardless of who you pull lever for electorally, we can all get on board with the fact that we need to protect children against exploitation, and we need to try to rid or at least mitigate the threat that we're seeing with child pornography as it's just ballooned out of control.
Right, and that priority is much higher than somebody who is trespassing inside of their own Capitol building.
It is, and he would contend, I guess, I'm hardly the Christopher Wray defender, but this message that the FBI has continued to hammer out, that domestic terrorism is the greatest and most existential threat to the homeland, it's just not true. But they're kind of in for a penny, in for a dollar at this point. They've been selling this for the last few years. As a result of that, the budget's been enhanced enormously, and it's forced them to manipulate statistics and argue for things that are just frankly absurd. I mean, last year the FBI argued that, or contended that, they disrupted 397 domestic terrorist attacks on the homeland. And if you look out your window, that would mean that the FBI stopped attack every day of the year and twice on Sunday, and that's just not true.
There was let me focus on terrorism for a moment, because we do have some audio there. Specifically as it relates to international terrorism threats. Here's Lindsey Graham today asking Chris Wray whether the border is posing a terror problem.
Are you concerned that international terrorism threats to the homeland are rising as the border continues to be broken?
I am concerned that we are in an elevated threat environment, a heightened threat environment from foreign terrorist organizations for a whole host of reasons. And obviously their ability to exploit any port of entry, including our southwest border, is a source of concern. You know, there's a lot of discussion about numbers, and numbers are important, but let's not forget that it didn't take a big number of people on 9/11 to kill 3,000 people. So while numbers are important, numbers don't tell the whole story. And we have seen an increase in so-called KSTs, known as suspected terrorists, attempting to cross, over the last 5 years.
So when you hear an FBI director convey that, and my suspicion is this yours, that's true, that there is a meaningful growing terror threat because the border's open?
Without a question. I mean, it's just simple mathematics. If you even give the government the benefit of the doubt, let's say that 99% of the people that they're having interactions with are being vetted properly, that just still leaves thousands of people that have crossed the border and could be nefarious actors. I do scratch my head a little bit about the line of questioning, because it seems like more of a homeland security type of question than an FBI question, and also very frustrated with the fact that Christopher Wray is able to pivot that and use that to encourage Congress to do the renewal of Section 702 under FISA.
Yeah. So, and the reason it seems like a lot of these guys, some of these Republican senators, they like Chris Wray. They have personal relationships with him. They kind of go easy on him as a result. But the end result is that they're not doing the government oversight necessary, the actual oversight of the FBI that they should be. So let's talk Section 702 now, because this came up today. Mike Lee was challenging Christopher Wray on all of the abuses of Section 702. That is, these are foreign intelligence surveillance powers that have been used routinely against American citizens. And they are up right now, the consideration for renewal. Is it your view, Steve Friend, that these powers should not be renewed?
100% they cannot be renewed. This is the ring of power. The FBI is incapable of wielding this in compliance with protecting and defending American civil liberties. This was intended to be a tool that they use to surveil foreign actors outside of the United States, but it's only useful for a domestic law enforcement agency if they use it to reverse target Americans. And they're not even hiding that fact now. They're saying that Section 702 is useful at tracking of fentanyl crossing the border. That has nothing to do with counterintelligence needs. So this tool cannot be in the hands of the FBI. And despite what Christopher Wray says about how they've implemented reforms and things are getting better, I compared this when I was having a conversation with our mutual friend Kyle Seraphin today. I said, look, if you gained 100 pounds 2 years ago, and then this year you only gained 50 pounds, I guess you got better, but the tax on your organs is not going to be going in the right direction. And I think that the FBI can just continue to abuse it, as we've seen statistics come out about it. They abused it about 300,000 times a couple of years ago.
Yeah, for sure. And that, by the way, the weight gain analogy is also useful for inflation. That's like, I was just thinking. But this is an FBI that has very little trust from the American people, and using those Section 702 powers, the FISA powers. There's well-established track record here of the FBI just trampling all over American civil liberties with a reckless abandon. And when they're caught, it's just slaps on the wrist and, hey, we'll try better in the future. As a result, Congress should be aggressive here. But are they, in your view, is Congress just going to reauthorize this thing? It feels like that's where this always goes.
I'm fearful that they're going to marry it with the budget. And then they're going to always do the same thing the Republicans always do, and that's say that a government shutdown is the worst possible scenario. So they will just go along with passing it, and then as a result of that, we'll have a renewal of Section 702. But this has to be divorced. It has to be a standalone issue. Christopher Wray won't even commit to the fact that there was discipline against individuals when those specific anecdotes were pointed out to him. He deflected off that.
Yes.
But that's kind of par for the course for him.
He never brings up any meaningful discipline of anybody, actually. In fact, today, Josh Hawley had some questions for him about the behavior of the Richmond field office of the FBI, which now infamously, everyone knows, was targeting Catholic churches. And Chris Wray had previously expressed that, and today he reiterated to some extent that he was aghast at that memo. Yet he seemed to have a million defenses of all of the FBI officials involved. Here it is.
But I can tell you that we don't investigate people for their exercise of their constitutionally protected religious expression. That particular intelligence product is something that as soon as I saw it, I was aghast. I had it withdrawn.
Really, you were aghast?
I was.
Oh, really?
Yes,
and what
sir.
have you done about it? Did you fire the people who wrote it?
No, I had it withdrawn.
Have you fired anybody involved in it?
Senator, if you would give me a chance to answer
That's a
your
yes
question.
or a no. It's not hard. Have you fired anyone involved in the writing of that outrageous memo, about which, frankly, you've repeatedly misled the public? Yes or no?
The individuals involved in that
Have you
product
fired
were
anyone?
Just a minute, were not found to have engaged in any intentional or bad faith conduct. And in fact, Senator, a number of the individuals involved in writing that product in the Richmond office were themselves Catholic. So the notion that they were targeting their own faith
so they
is
have a
nonsense.
get out of jail free card. I see. So you're
I did
immune
not
and
say
they're
that.
immune. So we shouldn't ask questions about it. You haven't done a darn thing. You haven't fired anybody.
If he's to be believed, Steve Friend, that this is was just a good faith mistake, they didn't mean to do this. I mean, what kind of training are FBI agents received if you don't get a bunch of alarms going off in your head when you start surveilling Catholic churches?
Well, they're being taught that we're an intelligence agency first and foremost, and if you're an intelligence agency, then constitutional protections don't even come into your calculus on this. It's all about just initiating the case and gaining information. That is, in fact, success. Whereas a real law enforcement investigation, you have to respect the rule of law, the Constitution, and the rules and policies, and then there's actually a finite end, and it ends either with a declaration or a prosecution of a subject. But with intelligence, as the FBI has now evolved or transitioned into this intelligence agency, they're looking for opportunities all the time. And it wasn't included in your clip there, but Christopher Wray's major defense was this was going to be a demerit on their annual performance reviews. And that to him is good enough, which I think any objective analysis of it is just laughable.
If FBI agents started surveilling a black church, do you think that Christopher Wray would react in the same way? None of these guys would be fired and they would get demerits on their record?
Oh, I mean, now we're in the tit for tat question, and
Yeah.
there's no question about it. It would just, you just got to do the simple swap in one for another. But Christopher Wray didn't really have any objections to FBI agents being pulled off of child pornography to investigate January 6th, or FBI agents doing surveillance of school board meetings, both of which I did, both of which he lied to the House Judiciary Committee a few months ago about.
What is your read? What's your read on Christopher Wray? Like, who is he? Some of the answers, like he gave a good answer today when he was asked by the abortion lady from California what happened after Dobbs, and he said, well, it turns out like lots of pro-life facilities have been attacked, and you may not want to hear this, but that's been happening. So that's a good answer. But what are his motivations? Is he just kind of like a guy who's trying to survive in the current regime and he'll do whatever they want? Is that who he is?
I think so. I mean, he has oversight of the FBI, not necessarily calling the shots. I think those are his chief deputies who have ascended through the ranks and actually came in as employees of the FBI. He's appointed. There's some question marks about how he was suggested. I think Chris Christie, he'd helped Chris Christie with Bridgegate, and then was suggested to President Trump, and then was elevated to the FBI director.
Right.
But then there's also the personal profit aspect to it. And look, Christopher Wray made $9.2 million the year before he was appointed the FBI director. So that's a pretty healthy salary. And so why do you take the $9 million pay cut? Well, you take that so you can get access to the FBI jet and you can live like a billionaire. And I think there's a certain esteem attached to that and maybe something on the back end.
Yeah. They were saying today, somebody confronted him today, maybe it was Tom Cotton, who said, hey, what's the deal with the private jet? Like the jet, we're being told that they fly the jet to D.C. to get you because normally you would have to go to Manassas to pick up the jet, but you don't like sitting in traffic. Is that true? And he's like, that's not true. That's not true. But he's like, they asked him about this, like, why are you taking the jet everywhere? Oh, it's FBI policy. What? First of all, can't the FBI director change the policy?
Correct. He can absolutely change the policy. Yes, he makes it fly from Manassas to pick him up at Reagan, about 40 miles. He doesn't want to sit in traffic. And it flies him to Atlanta every Friday afternoon so he can be with his family over the weekend, returns to Manassas, then on Sunday picks him up, flies him back to Reagan, and then flies back to Manassas. The whole thing costs about $30,000, and he's only obligated to pay the lowest fare that he can find or have one of his underlings find on orbit. So it's probably about $200.
Right. And so, but when he sits up there, as he did today, multiple times, he said, this is longstanding policy at the FBI. He can change that.
He can always change that, which is why I always laugh when he says that it's longstanding policy that the FBI does not comment on an ongoing investigation, even when the Congress has oversight authority, legally, statutory authority over his agency. He says, well, it's our policy to, I guess, violate the law. And I guess that's out of his hands. He can't change the policy. Well, we know that's not true. He's supposed to be in charge of this agency.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, Steve Friend, thank you as always, sir. Really appreciate your insight into all of this. Nice to talk to you today.